Thank you, Chris. David, thank you for coming tonight. David, thank you for.
Okay, good evening. Calling the meeting of the Ferrisburg Planning Commission to order. Roll call, please.
Chairman Post,
Here.
Commissioner Carlson,
Here.
Commissioner Holly, Commissioner Schoberg, Commissioner DeYoung,
Here.
Commissioner Weber, Commissioner Tuggle.
Here.
Commissioner Holly and Weber.
Support.
As they previously communicated, they could not be here tonight. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. May I have a motion for consideration of the agenda for tonight?
So moved to approve agenda as presented.
Support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And consideration for approval, the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes? Have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, this is the time of the meeting when we have public comments. If anyone in the audience would like to step forward and identify themselves, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Jason Larabelle, 16814 Virginia Avenue, also known as Skip. I just wanted to come up here. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight. I know you guys have already been through a lot of our stuff, so I just wanted to make a quick public comment for you guys, all right? I wanted to thank the Planning Commission for taking the time to review our position on allowing us to share free garden produce. I assure you, we do not come to you with combative, malicious, or careless intent. We believe the success and soul of Ferrisburg resides in its residents rather than its regulations. In our city, we have some neighborhoods with beautiful tree-covered streets. We have some neighborhoods with quiet and enjoyable streets for summer walks and sunsets. We have some neighborhoods that are filled with neighbors who socialize and celebrate how lucky we are for living where we do. We have a beautiful lake for fishing, boating, and summer-long activities. We even have some neighborhoods that come together and do amazing things like put on the chili cook-off, which has raised thousands of dollars for people and causes in need. Regardless of what neighborhood you live in, Ferrisburg is special and because of the people in it. Sharing with our neighbors and others is an excellent opportunity to grow our community with little to no negative impact on the things we all love and enjoy. It can be as simple as a basket at your doorstep with a couple of garden tomatoes. There's always room for learning and improvement, and that is how we grow. I would rather see the city make recommendations for this sort of activity than regulations. A permit may seem discouraging rather than encouraging for a simple act that can provide direct benefits to our town. Regardless of your decision, we will be following any recommendations and regulations. I hope you can understand that sharing free produce can be a service to each other at no cost to the city with a safe and minimal footprint, all while embracing the unique aspects of the city that we love. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak at this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public comment and move into work session. So, Greg, I understand this is our work session on small-scale produce stands, and normally we would not have further public comment except at the discretion of the board at this time.
That's correct.
Craig, do you want to give us a recap of why this is back before us?
Yes, City Council had it on the agenda for March 3 at that time, or March 17th. And at that time, the Larabells came to the meeting and spoke that they would like to be exempt from the ordinance. And so after City Council discussed it, they referred it back to the Planning Commission to review that request.
Thank you. Members of the commission, would anyone care to start the conversation?
Could we have Dave expound on this a little first before we comment?
Excellent idea. Dave, could you step in, please?
Sure. As you know, we've been working on the ordinance for a few months, and I think I think it was a good solution overall to include the free sharing aspect to the produce stand provision that's currently in the zoning ordinance. I think ultimately it is it's a little bit beyond what we would consider commonly accessory or ancillary to a residential use. It is more of a consistent long-term seasonal use rather than there's been some comparisons to a lemonade stand, which I don't think is a good comparison. I think might be on a weekend. It's by children. It's very infrequent. This is something that is just a bit more of a consistent feature of a neighborhood. I don't think at all, we're not saying it's a bad thing. I just think a permit in ensuring that there's a consistent interpretation by both the city and consistent and understanding and expectations of what's allowable. I think for the city to have that as well as anyone proposing a produce stand, I think it's really for the benefit of both those parties. Even when there's a permit involved, folks who have that permit in hand, they can set it if there's something with neighbors. Hey, we are in line, we're permitted. We're working with these parameters with this ordinance. So the city can say the same thing. If there's a sort of complaint, we back at the conditions of that permit and the conditions in the zoning ordinance say they're compliant. This was what we all agreed on. These are the expectations that the applicant agreed to. The permanent process itself allows them to any applicant to outline what they're proposing as well. So it gives the city a clear vision of what's going to be happening there during that season. So I mean, I think the ordinance shows it about 9 or 10 months out of the year, so it's helpful for the zoning administrator to know what's going to happen. The size of the table, the sign location, how they're handling customer traffic. So I think overall, I think this was a good solution to the issue that arose. I don't think at all anyone ever thought this was a bad thing. I think everyone has always agreed that this is a good thing. It can be, but we also want to make sure that this case or other cases don't become something more than they currently are. We don't want something to evolve into something that becomes problematic. I'm not saying that this one would, but I've been in this business a long time and I've seen things evolve and snowball into accessory uses that become more than something that's commonly accessory. So overall, I mean, the permit is, it takes a few minutes to type out. It's free of costs. It could be a one-time permit as well. We do have that it's an annual review. I don't think that's necessary. If you want to simplify it a bit more, maybe it's just a one-time permit that sets the expectations for an applicant and sets the permit in place. So if there were any changes, if you wanted to consider any changes, I would maybe just look at the term of the permit, and maybe it could just be an annual. Or I'm sorry, it could be a one-time permit. And then if there were changes to the proposal, they could always come back in and ask for that permit to be amended to change the location on the site or some other aspect to it. But again, it's free of cost. It just takes a couple minutes. Typing up the narrative for an application takes a lot less time than compared to these last 4 months of talking about the produce stands. And ultimately, I think no one has ever really opposed this from this venue. Craig, myself, the commission. I think the only negative aspect was that we said that it's just not allowable under the current ordinance. It doesn't mean that we agree with the ordinance. It's under the current provisions. It just wasn't permitted. That was clearly stated in the ZBA memo that was distributed for that meeting. So this is all on the record. All the answers are there. So I'm happy to answer questions. I know they would like to be exempt from the ordinance. I don't agree with that. I think that the permit would be the best solution. It protects them, protects the city's interests, protects the neighbors' interests, and then maybe just look at the term of the permit. Maybe it is a one-time permit, amended again if the operation changes.
Gina, would you like to follow up?
Sure, that protection for the other parties, I think, is important. I guess I was blindsided when this was challenged. We worked so hard to come to something that everyone would agree. And my last memory is right before the very end, Mayor Carlson said, "Are you okay with this?" And the Larrabelle said, "Yes, thank you," and left. In my opinion, there are 3 reasons that you need to have some kind of ordinance. First of all is food safety. Food has to be, it can't be adulterated at all. You can't even cut a watermelon in half without the health department getting involved. The second is traffic and parking safety. There's concern, especially in residential neighborhoods where children play and people live. And thirdly, neighborhood continuity. People usually choose homes with family and children in mind, and any establishment that impacts that neighborhood impacts people's lives. I think it's irrelevant that things are free or not free, although I do know that there is an ad currently accepting donations for heirloom tomatoes. I don't think it matters if they're free or not. I don't think it matters that there were fears that there would be over enforcement of violations, and that's not how Craig operates. That's not how our city operates. If there are no violations, there's no problem. Council and PC are not responsible for any kind of problems with neighbors. There seems to be a lot there. That's not something we can get involved with. You'll have to determine between the 2 of you if you can get along or not. To bring it to us and say, well, we've asked them not to contact us and all of that, irrelevant. Also, I think any previous violations that are not related to the food stand have no relevance either. I also don't think that it's right that people can just decide what they're going to follow. If you don't like an ordinance, you have 2 opportunities, initiative and referendum. And I have been part of both, one successful and one unsuccessful. I don't think that this is an unfair thing. I think we work very hard to work with you, and I would support sending this back to council as we had originally suggested.
Dave, it's also my understanding, it's my recollection is I said congratulations to the Larrabelles after our last meeting where I thought we had put this to bed and we all had an agreement. And it's my understanding that just before the council meeting that there were some second thoughts, and that's why we've agreed to look at it again. I sort of hesitate to recommend that we send it back to council unless there is an affirmative sign that the proponents of this particular case are willing to pursue this. I mean, if we've gone to this great lengths to try to accommodate you and try to create what I think we feel is a win-win. Everyone thinks this is a cute idea, but the city has to have some means of representing both sides, your side and the neighbors. And so we've crafted an ordinance that last month was agreeable, but I guess I would also consider taking no action on this at this time until you tell us this is something you can live with. If you're taking the stand that you don't want to be bound by this ordinance, I'm not sure what the point of passing it would be if you're not going to follow it. But I'd like to hear some other comments.
I would say I do think Skip clarified in his public comment that they would abide by the ordinance. I think he clarified that during that. I did kind of, where Gina said, agreed that, like, when I had left it, I really thought the chair, Heather had good questions. The mayor, I think, even accommodated the Larabells quite a bit, moving things on the agenda so they could leave early. During comments, making sure and asking whenever there was something that maybe was a difference of opinion, allowing comment on that. So I do think that the commission did go above and beyond to really try and accommodate the family. I also think that there should be anybody that wants to have a produce stand, that we should make this for anybody that wants to. If anybody wanted to do it and have it to the scale that this family has, I believe this ordinance would protect them, protect the interests of that neighborhood, the community, and also the city. So because of that, I would recommend.
Thank you.
I have some thoughts. I think a lot of them were already covered by David. But I think that this board and the city council has been overwhelmingly supportive of the produce stand. And we've all spent a lot of volunteer time and effort to accommodate, the requests of the Larabel family. And we've come up, I think, with a very reasonable ordinance. And regardless if it's free or sold or donations are taken, I don't think that that's our place as a planning commission to have any regulation over what they're charging, if they're charging. And like we were talking about too, this is not an ordinance specifically only for the Larabells, but this would be for anybody in the city that wanted to do the same thing, which I'm in complete support of. Maybe I'll have one at my place someday. I always have extra produce too. But in this instant, I think it's important that we have clear parameters for every stand. I think it's important really for Craig to have clear parameters, the neighbors to have clear parameters, so everybody is on the same page and understands the expectations. And if there are, if somebody does complain of a violation, then like Dave was saying, this can say, well, this is compliant with the ordinance, and then that it's problem solved. And I've heard Larabel say numerous times that they can operate within the guidelines of the ordinance, and a lot of this ordinance was really specifically tailored to their requests. So, I don't think it's within our power to regulate if or what is sold or donated or shared or anything like that. I think the main thing that we're here to help with is, traffic, parking, setbacks, signs, things like that, that even apply to those sharing boxes for books, like that. And I think that will also just give parameters so it doesn't, I'm not saying that they would, but anybody wouldn't a commercial use in a residential property. I think that those parameters will help to put that, that type of boundary in. Yeah, I feel like we've come up with a solution that is good for everybody. And we, like I said before, we've all been supportive of this, and city council, I just haven't seen anybody that has not been supportive. So I guess I was a little confused as to why it ended up coming back to us too. And it just seemed like, maybe there was a little seeds planted on social media that we were not supportive, and I just don't think that that's the case.
I'd like to raise one specific question. Part of the communication from the Larabells after or just before the city council meeting was asking that we rewrite the draft ordinance to, I believe, take out free sharing of produce from the ordinance. I just want to, I'm not hearing anyone speak in favor of making that change. I think the feeling is that we have I feel we have a win-win with a very easy, friendly ordinance that also provides the city with some means of speaking to possible issues, possibly from other neighbors about parking or any other concerns that might come up under the ordinance. Is anyone entertaining the thought that we should make changes to the draft ordinance?
I had you've gone around the room here and asked for people's comments. I'll give mine real quick. That is that, yeah, we did have, I thought, a pretty good agreement at our last meeting here to take to city council. And that's why I was so surprised, as I think all of you were, as to how that unfolded. But luckily for us, there's a process for the Larabells if they want to continue with this follow, which is a great thing. And that's why it's back here. Planning Commission, of course, is always concerned about setting precedents. And one of the things that I always looked at when we were working on this previously was, what if somebody was doing this next door to my home? Or some, or 4 doors away or whatever, because that's essentially what we're doing. And I thought we had crafted something that was quite workable. What I'd be interested in hearing from is from David, okay? And that is that if we were to strike the or public sharing from the document as they are proposing, essentially that means the city could not regulate parking, except it would just be as a residence. And traffic, we'd have no mechanism to regulate that as well. And then the other question I'd have for you is, if we go back and just send this just back to city council the way it sits right now, you're talking about the permitting. How does that work in relationship to the document? Thank you.
Well, I guess there's two parts in looking at the markup received from the Larabells on March 21. So the first part of that is to strike public sharing.
Yes.
And so if that was the only change, they would still be in violation of the current ordinance.
Yeah.
But then the change that they've added then on page 2 would then address the issue to bring it into compliance. So saying that they're suggesting that you were recognizing the sharing of free produce, plants, flowers, eggs, and so on shall not require a permit. And then they've added in some similar provisions to our what we've already proposed. Again,
David, the reason I'm mentioning about the 2 words is because at city council meeting, I remember asking the Larabells about, hey, we're coming down to 2 words. That's essentially what the big long email was about. It came down to, hey, I want to change 2 things, 2 words.
Yeah, I think, if you struck the 2 words, public sharing, that doesn't solve anything for anyone.
Okay.
The other option is just they've suggested adding a paragraph that specifically states that this public sharing of free produce would be exempted. In that case, there would be enforcement authority concerning the setbacks, the size, the number, and the location of the stand outside. So really, the only difference would be that there wouldn't be a permit involved at that point. But I mean, I suppose if you said that a free produce stand is subject to the same requirements except for a permit's unnecessary, I mean, we would still have the same enforcement authority if we basically replicated the same requirements for free sharing.
Very good.
Could I just bring up 2 fun facts? One is almost every community, including the county, has some kind of regulation of food produce stands. And at one point, didn't we prohibit them totally? Like maybe 10 or 12 years ago? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the produce stand ordinance was drafted in 2013.
Yeah.
I think right before I started working with you.
Yeah.
I think Sean
And
Seymour worked on that.
Even the county has something about produce stands. And the other fun fact, I think, or interesting thing is, if you have a business, if you're a tax preparer or an accountant or a hairdresser, you can have 5 visitors a day, and this is your livelihood, and you're paying taxes. We have a 12-hour day that allows for all the people that want to have a produce stand 8 months out of the year. So I think it's more than fair, and I think no one is against produce stands. We just want to make sure that things are fair for everyone, not just you, but for neighbors and for people other people that want to have a produce stand.
So my concern with excluding the sharing or the free produce is what position does that put our code enforcer in of having to monitor when is the produce free or when are they having a fundraiser and charging or, you know, taking donations or whatever. I think that just puts the city in a pickle.
Mr. Chairman, that's why I say it's irrelevant if it's free. I don't care if it's free or if you charge or if you have a fundraiser. It doesn't affect the operation of the produce stand itself as far as the ordinance is concerned.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
it's important that we had that discussion about. That's what we. But
Craig, is it appropriate to have a motion to send it back to council, or what other options do we have?
You can send it back to council. You can amend it if you like. Those are the options.
Session, we have a motion.
No.
You have consensus or just send it back.
And I mentioned tabling it.
There's no motion on the floor.
No motion on the floor. So
Since this is a work session, would this just be on our next month agenda? Is that the purpose of this?
Yes.
Has anyone else anything to add before we close the work session?
I think I was the only one not to comment on excluding the 2 words. I think very similar to CN. I believe they should be in the interest of the city and whoever applies for the related permit.
Thank you. Okay.
So, just to be clear, you're directing staff to put on the agenda with no changes.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, that closes the work session on small-scale produce stands, and now we move to the work session discussion of Master Plan Goal 6, review and recommendation for changes. Dave, I'd like to make note of a meeting that the city manager and the mayor and I had a couple days ago. We were fortunate to arrange a meeting with staff from the Ottawa County Department of Strategic Initiatives to discuss the county initiative to support beautiful, lovable, but distinctly small scale or small footprint homes. And among other things, one thing that was made very clear to us is that communities like Ferrisburg that are looking to review our zoning ordinances and policies to try to be more friendly for housing, that the county wants to be a resource and wants to try to help us. And I think that was very reassuring that we have an ally, a resource to look at. And coming out of that discussion, there will be some materials that were shared with the mayor and the city manager and myself, and we'll be sharing those because we just got them 2 days ago. We didn't seem like we didn't want to add to your reading requirements for this meeting, but we do have some exciting stuff coming up for next month. And with that, David, could you lead us off on this discussion?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. We, as you know, in the housing goals and objectives, we have a new narrative concerning the statewide housing plan as well as the overall housing shortage. And as you know, one of the purpose of the grant that we received to prepare the master plan and zoning amendments was to help to increase the supply of housing in the city. So this entire project is funded based on the acknowledgement that we are going to work on housing issues in the city. At the same time, it doesn't mean we're opening up the floodgates, but we want something to help meet that goal, that objective, that still fits the character and scale of the existing city neighborhoods. So with that, we have a general goal for housing in the recently approved master plan. And then there are 10 specific actions noted in the master plan concerning housing as it relates to zoning requirements. That's really in my opinion, I believe it's our next step in this process. We are under a 2-year time frame to complete the master plan, which is done, as well as our corresponding zoning amendments. So I think our grant will probably get through 2026. I think we awarded it mid-year in 24. So we do have some time. We have a little bit over a year to get this done. As you said, Mr. Chairman, in the email, we want to make sure that we begin progress. We start moving on this, but we want to do it right, and we want to make sure that we do the proper background research and analysis to make sure we calibrate these requirements appropriately. So some of the 10 that you have in your packet was to consider multifamily housing in our commercial districts, so general commercial, service, and core commercial. So putting apartments or multifamily within areas that are already planned for higher intensity commercial uses. Allowing mixed use in those same districts. So that could be a development that has a horizontal mixed use, which could have a commercial building up front, offices, and maybe townhouses to the back. Or you could have vertical mixed use, which is typically you have offices or retail on the first floor, and you can have apartments over. Taller buildings in the core commercial. And if there is redevelopment with dwelling units in those buildings. So what we could do is take a look at the height requirements in core commercial and possibly add on an extra story or an extra 12 feet or so if someone is proposing housing units to be in that type of building. So it would incentivize redevelopment by giving an extra story, a little bit extra developable area, if they're helping to meet the housing goals of the city in core commercial. Next would be accessory dwelling units. So as you know, accessory dwelling units are smaller secondary units on a property. They could be either attached, they could be an attic unit, a walkout basement unit, or just attached to a house. Or you have detached accessory dwelling units, which could be smaller, tiny house type of arrangement in a rear yard. That those are fairly straight. There's a lot of good models out there concerning accessory dwelling units that we can look at, and we can determine which zoning districts would be appropriate to consider for them. Attached housing, duplexes, townhouses, row houses. One of the actions would be to assess the appropriateness of those in RG1 and RG2, so attached housing products. Reduction of lot sizes and width in all residential districts to match the existing context. So a lot of times we see in zoning permit applications, or in many cases, applications that go to the ZBA, that the first thing I do is to say, okay, well, is this a practical difficulty? Is this a real issue that the zoning board should grant a variance for? And I say, okay, well, this lot is 50 feet. It's 50% of what's required for this district, or it's only 66% of the area required by this district. So we're seeing a lot of cases where we see non-conforming lots they're small and narrow compared to the requirements that we're adding on them. So, like for instance, if we have a setback of 10 feet or 15 feet or whatever it might be, that's assuming the lot is compliant at 75 feet or 100 feet. So those setbacks are calibrated toward a conforming lot size. So if we have so we can look at different neighborhoods or blocks of the city. We may find areas that we see consistently lots are 50% of what's required. In that case, we may identify certain areas or the district as a whole and say, okay, maybe we should drop this lot size down to this, or the lot width down to this to match the existing context. That's one approach. Another approach could be, well, just make it smaller anyway, just to make more affordable lots, to allow for some smaller houses, to allow for infill. So that's maybe the more aggressive approach to it. So first would be to match the existing context, kind of eliminate non-conforming situations. build. Then next would be to even go a little bit further and narrow lots or make them a little bit smaller, as long as we're still achieving something that's within the vision of the city. If you don't want to completely transform an area, we just maybe make slight adjustments to those requirements. If you say we want to completely transform an area, that's when you really make a more aggressive change the ordinance. I don't really think that is the goal for our residential districts. I think we're getting a little bit more aggressive in our non-residential districts, considering mixed use and apartments in those non-residential zoning districts. So in any case, we need to respect the existing context and existing neighborhoods. Next would be, so we were looking at lot sizes and lot width as it relates to attached housing. So as you know from our work through the zoning reform toolkit, every time you add an extra unit on a house, so you go to a duplex or a triplex or a townhouse with a couple units in it, you have to add on an extra, I want to say it's 7,000 square feet or so on some of our districts. So if we have a 10,000 square feet for the first unit, then you're adding on 7,000 for each additional unit. That really ends up in a situation where you have a very large lot in maybe a attached building that could be on something much smaller than that. So it's very inefficient use of land, and even in a built environment, that's going to just look out of place. If you're in a neighborhood and you're redeveloping a lot, you'd have to tear down a couple houses just to put in a row house or something with a couple of units, and then it would look really out of place in that type of environment. So we want to take a look at these different blocks and neighborhoods to see how we can fit in fine grain infill type of attached housing to make sure that it's similar scale as a single family house, but it fits the neighborhood and that doesn't have a sea of green space around it where that's not really that type of neighborhood. So next would then be the incentives for affordable or attainable housing through zoning flexibility or PUD modifications. So I think we did look last year at our PUD provisions, so we may want to include affordability or attainable housing as one of the recognizable benefits in our PUD process. Again, we also looked at the PUD process as we went through the Cottage Shores project. It was a lengthy process, and it was not necessarily consistent with the master plan. We had a number of issues. Even certain sections were conflicting with each other. And so we need to clean up that PUD process if it's going to be a tool for housing, using the housing supply, making sure that we're getting projects that you want to see in the city. Next would be to streamline review processes, to shorten review timeframes, and provide clear expectations through predictable procedures and requirements. So again, we shouldn't have to go through a 6-month process to get a project that we like. As we work through these zoning requirements, we want to make sure they're clear and they're adjusted and calibrated so that we can put in a house or a duplex or a townhouse in a certain area that doesn't have to go through a 3 or 4 month process through planning commission or other variances or anything else. And then also we were looking at garage requirements for residential dwellings. That's a little bit more specific, but so with that we can look at certain things that we require for housing. So the garage requirement, as well as one thing, it's not here, but I think the spirit is there, the minimum area of a house. So, and I recall we had that conversation, but I think our minimum areas are not significantly large. I know in some communities you have them much larger. Let's see what we have here. Single family detached minimum is 960 square feet. So that is fairly small. I know that the one publication from Strong Towns, there's some recommendations to eliminate minimum dwelling size or significantly reduce them. I think we can still look at that and consider that as part of this process as well.
Thank you. So just because we didn't specifically list it in the 10 items in the master plan review, while we are in this process of doing a deep dive into all these requirements and what can we do to make our city of Ferrisburg as friendly and yet lovable. We want lovable housing, not, I don't know, some sort of alien thing that is going to be out of context with our community. But we can, the county is promoting 4 blueprints that are open source that any of us could access and use to build a new house. And I believe they go from 480 to 600 to 800 to something above 800. So at least those 3 would be below the 900. But you're saying we can either do away with the allowance or lower it as we see fit.
Yeah, it wasn't a specific recommendation in the master plan, but I think anything that is within the spirit of our housing goal, we can still consider. Because as you recall, over the last couple of years, they're commonly zoning text amendments, and they're not specifically listed in the master plan. As long as they're consistent with the goal, we can still consider. I think during that project, during our review of the housing reform toolkit, zoning reform toolkit for housing, I think we specifically said these are the 10 that we really want to look at, but that doesn't preclude us from looking at others as well.
Yes, and one of those 10, to my recollection, was just sort of an aside, whether or not we wanted to have residential on the ground floor level in the retail area, as opposed to the usual conception that you'd have a storefront and maybe an apartment above. To me, I think that was, we were just saying, what if? It's not one of the most important recommendations.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I recall we had the conversation, and I think the question was asked, should we ensure that it's always retail on the first floor? And I think that Planning Commission said, hey, let's answer that question later. We at least set this up as something we can get into more detail during the zoning process. So.
I sort of interrupted you, David. Did you have some more on the list, or did we?
That's all 10. So this will take some time. I think there's going to be some background research on my end, and I think I think at least by June I could probably have something that's worthwhile for a deeper conversation. For May, I could see it's already going to be 3 weeks until packets are due for the May meeting, so I can see what I can pull together for May to continue the conversation. But I think we should really maybe shoot toward June to have, at least for me, to have something more in depth. And I think maybe what we could do is also create a plan. What are we? Can we handle this all at once? Or are we going to prioritize a few of these, one by one? Maybe that's the conversation we have at the next meeting. Maybe just rank which ones we want to work on first, or we can just work on all of them at the same time. And I kind of want to wrap my head around these 10 and think of a good strategy how we can accomplish working on all of them. And maybe I may end up suggesting that we take a chunk at a time. But I think once we have a chance to, master plan is freshly adopted, and now is a good time to just take a step back and see where we need to go on this on the housing recommendations.
I would like to kind of reiterate what you're saying, and I think this is a really exciting opportunity for us, but it's a deep dive, and I'd sort of like to consider our next month just more education. Just this evening, the mayor shared with me, I think it's called a podcast that's put out by Ottawa County, where they were interviewing representatives of the Office of Strategic Initiatives, talking about this small footprint design. Very interesting discussion, and I really felt they could have been talking to us specifically about how we want infill housing, but we want it to represent the character and charm of Ferrysburg. So, that's about an hour of listening. And also, I shared with you, David, a very readable but 32-page toolkit put out by a group called Smart Homes that I think a lot of the passion and energy, as the similar points about the housing needs are being discussed, is really educational and will be, I think it's important for us to kind of see this because, change is a difficult thing to wrap your head around. So I just would like to say, I think we should take our time and do some education and make sure that we're all comfortable with kind of the big choices that we're considering recommending to council. Would anyone else care to comment on this topic at this time?
I have, one thing I'd like to see is some partnerships with, like in Spring Lake, they have the Samaritas Project that is low-income housing. They have 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. Some of them are reserved for Native Americans, I think 8 units. And I think that kind of partnership is something we should look forward to. Craig, could we have container homes here?
Sorry,
Would we allow container homes here?
we do.
We do? Okay, because I've seen some really cool ones. They're not all just like, a train station box or something. They're kind of cool. When you have a tiny home, it still has to have the same infrastructure, right? It has to have sewage, it has to have water, it has to have electricity.
Water's not required, but it's recommended. Sewer is required.
The thing that concerns me about that is I don't see how it's viable to have 2 or 3 kids in a house of 400 square feet, or to be, 75 years old and have to crawl up in a loft to get to your bedroom, So I think, you would have to prove to me that some of these are doable. And, as I said, you're still going to have the infrastructure. I have nothing against tiny homes. I don't want to live in one myself, but I know people do. So those are a couple of my concerns. The other concern is when you're talking about like putting housing in the SAG area, where? I mean, we don't have much land left. So one spot I really like is on the corner of Old Grand Haven Road and Van Wagner. There are 7 acres for sale, and I don't think they're low like some of them are. Maybe you need some filler, but that would be a great place for some affordable housing, I think, multifamily housing. But anyway, what I have to say.
Thank you, Regina. And I just want to add to your comment. Certainly, if we have the ability to do a partnership with Samaritas, they're leaders in that field, that would be excellent. And also the county, when they were stressing small footprint homes, they were sort of at pains to say it's a step above or a step larger than tiny.
Okay.
So apparently there's a distinction between tiny and small.
There's some homes as you go into Muskegon on 31. Have you seen those? They don't have garages or anything, but
Right north of Stern.
yeah.
So that's the first thing you normally think about when you think like not tiny, not medium, like schmediable.
They're
right in between.
tidy and they're nice looking, and
They have no garages.
Yeah, but you could add them. I mean, I hate to see no garages because we've lived in that in Ferrisburg, and it has not been positive. But that's another discussion. But I think those are really cool little houses. They're quite affordable, I think. And some of them have 2, 3 bedrooms. So if you've got 3 kids, no one's going to be up in the loft.
I think like the ones I'm thinking, like one thing about now is those, and then southeast side of Grand Rapids, there's some of the nonprofits. A large development there where I think Dave knows more. It's a huge block, and they made it with a ton of accommodation. Very dense housing. I don't think we're there, but like in between, that's where I didn't know. What I've heard from, just in conversation, there are 3 people have talked to me about, oh, can we put something out back? I think they're saying like accessory dwelling units. I think that's what that means. And then you just don't realize how many of those exist in the city until you like look around, like on top of garages, people in the back, especially in the cottage district. What I hear most as it relates to some of the things we're talking about now is having maybe a rental on, having it where your kids are done with college and you you have a place up above. I think that's more of what we'll see in the immediate development of 800, 900, 700 square foot home.
There's also, in Muskegon, Craig, do you know anything about all the houses, as you go into Muskegon, there is some kind of partnership, I know, with the city, I think. Many, many new houses near Webster and around, do you know what that project is?
No, I don't.
Because a bunch of them went up and they're beautiful. They've just transformed that neighborhood too, so things to look at.
The city of Muskegon certainly enjoys development. Them doing it themselves, right? Mr. Chair, could I say a few words?
Certainly.
Okay, certainly enjoyed our meeting the other day with Craig and the people from the county and the architect and the fellow from the non-governmental body that was a housing proponent. And what struck me was he was saying that the average home price in Ottawa County, correct me if I'm wrong, $375, correct, ballpark, and that 13% or so of the population can afford that. 13%. And so what these smaller homes provide is an ability for people to be able to afford a home, because homeownership is part of the American dream. And it's terrible for us to be forcing people to be renters, whether it be in a mobile home park or an apartment building or whatever. You can't build any equity. And so it's not like Regina was saying, you know, you can't see this person there or that person there. There are people that will, if it fits the right situation, it's extremely viable. So I'm excited about it. And I'm excited about all the other options that we've got available to the city of Ferrisburg for housing as well. Gary, can we get, I very quickly looked at a blueprint for one of those smaller homes. Can we get some, at least the footprint drawings in the Planning Commission's hands? And then also whether that video that I just emailed you from the county before the meeting would be appropriate to pass along, or that 32-page thing that you shared for David and I. So
Yes, all of the above.
Okay.
And I'd also like to mention one of your comments, Mr. Mayor, as the county representatives were talking about how they've tried to create 4 blueprint footprints of homes. One of them is called Lake and Dunes. And it sort of reminded me of your comment about cottages.
yes,
In one word, what are we looking for more of in Ferrisburg is probably something that might be called a cottage when we want to talk about a small footprint home that would
Fit in.
look good and fit in. And so I don't want to belabor this meeting. I just want to kind of say I think as a commission this is some serious stuff, and I think it's fair to give ourselves some time to do some research and warm up to the topic so that we can make some good and informed choices. Would anyone else like to comment on this before we close this work session? Okay, closing the work session and moving to second call for public comments.
Oliver Champagne, 540 D Avenue in Grand Haven. I wanted to share something since you guys are speaking about housing, and the living wage is an hourly rate that an individual in a household must earn to support themselves and or their family working full-time or 2,080 hours per year. Now, in Ottawa County, a family of 4, both parents working, 2 children, they would need to make $25.78 each per hour. Let's just say one of them's working, they had 2 children. They would have to make $42 an hour to make a living wage. It's not super realistic. And with housing continuing to become more expensive in this community, I find it concerning. And I think I love that you bring up Samaritas, but I don't know if that's the person I'd partner with, because Samaritas is mostly a substance and drug use center, but they got invested in the homelessness issue or the homeless issue because it's hard to tackle drug use, it's hard to tackle substance use if people don't have a home to live in the first place. There's a terrible fact, actually, in this country that there is more housing available that's vacant than there is homeless people living. Now, we might not have them in the right locations. Or there's another fact that 3 million families a year face eviction. Thousands, tens of thousands in Ottawa County ourselves. Crazy enough, though, a lot of people of the homeless population, 30 to 40% of them have part-time to full-time jobs. And I bring all this up because I believe, in position with the Larabels, that zoning is part of the issue. And just because laws or regulations exist, that does not justify them, whether it's with produce or with housing. I think it's interesting enough, historically, zoning itself has its basis in racism, and it's still perpetuated into a lot of zoning laws today. It used to just say, no black people can live in this community, and they specifically started changing the words to say single family. And I think I would love for you guys to look into the history of that. The Color of Law is a beautiful book, but zoning hurts culture. In fact, I watched this documentary of this man that had just built this beautiful woodwork, and it had just his address and his name. That is all. And they attempted to restrict him, and he went through a 3-year legal process to just keep up a beautiful piece of artwork that also clearly says what house number it is. So I guess I just want to end with the addition of a free produce requirement seems like a way to justify allowing the stand while keeping control over it. And I'm all for health, safety, and traffic concerns. That is all very important to me. But if someone wants to provide free produce, they should be able to do so without having to jump through hoops. People should be able to provide produce as long as they follow health and safety rules. Simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you. Zoning Administrator's Report.
No report?
Chairman report. I'd like to just mention that we just completed the master plan last year, and some of the fun things that are coming up in Ferrysburg will be the summer concert series at William Ferry Park. I hope everyone will try to avail themselves of that and tell their friends and family. And also on April 26th, we have a hike in the Ferrysburg Nature Preserve. We'll be meeting at the Ferrysburg Community Church parking lot at 10 o'clock. And I think some really important local officials may be there, Mr. Mayor.
I'll be there. I'm looking forward to it.
Other board member comments?
I have no report tonight, thank you.
All I know is that there are 770,000 homeless people in America. So anything we can do in the way of partnerships to help alleviate that. I don't think it's as big a problem here, but I do volunteer at a food bank, and there are homeless people in this area. People are surprised when I say that there's even a need for a food bank here. People say, well, there aren't any poor people here, are they? Well, yeah, there are. There are people that are working poor that can't afford to put food on their tables. So I think anything we can do to help with affordable housing is well worth the effort.
Thank you.
No report.
I'm in Virginia. Yeah, so I see on my drive home from work, 2 times a month, 2 different places, there's the Feeding America trucks, and they're not almost where you'd expect, and the lines are huge, and there's like vehicles where the payment on that, and you find yourself thinking about that, even when you shouldn't. It's
Yeah.
just, it's almost like intrusive where you just stop thinking about it. It's everywhere. No comment.
Mr. Mayor, okay. I believe our next meeting is May 1st. May 1st. Do I adjourn the meeting, or do I call for a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Or all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Gary.
No, I don't think so.
But interesting, done by United Way.
Yes.